This is rental car number 127, and man, is that getting to be a big number. Today I'm driving the 2019 Hyundai Elantra GT. Now remember, there's the Elantra, which is a compact car, and there's the Elantra GT, which is a hatchback. This is the hatchback. It retails for about $23,000. It's got some pretty nice looking 17-inch alloy wheels, and little history lesson, this is the 6th generation of the Elantra. Hyundai has actually been making this car since 1991, which blows my mind. I don't even remember Hyundai being around that long. Anyway, under the hood we got a 2-liter inline 4-cylinder engine. It also has a 6-speed automatic transmission with SHIFTRONIC technology. If you don't know, SHIFTRONIC is just a fancy marketing term, meaning if you want to, you can shift that gear shift over to the left and then push it up or down to shift those gears manually. This thing kicks out 161 horsepower at 6,200 RPMs and gets some really good gas mileage, at least in my opinion. In the city, you're going to get 25 miles per gallon. On the highway, you're going to get 32 miles per gallon, and your combined rating is about 27. You got a 14-gallon fuel tank. I love it when fuel tanks are nice round numbers like 14. Anyway, 14-gallon fuel tank. Gas by me in the Chicago suburbs right now in spring of 2019 is around $2.85 a gallon. That means, at least by me, you can fill this thing up for a little bit under $40. So I rented this car for about 2.5 days, and during that time I was probably behind the wheel for almost 6 hours. I mean, I did a ton of driving on this thing. And I gotta say, it's a blast to drive. Handling is solid. It's just super responsive when you turn that steering wheel. You know, last week I drove the Hyundai Accent, and the week before that I drove the Toyota Corolla, and there's just no comparison. The Elantra GT is much smoother, it's much more responsive, and it is a lot more fun to drive, especially when it comes to acceleration. I mean, this thing is smooth when you put it into sport mode, and the engine just sounds so nice when you hit that accelerator. It really growls in a nice way that I wasn't expecting from a hatchback like this. Cabin noise is also really exceptional. I actually just returned this car about 2 hours ago, and I was on the interstate for a good hour and 45 minutes this afternoon, going 70, 75, 80 at points, and I didn't have to touch the volume at all while I was listening to my audiobook. Typically, in a car like this, especially at this price point, when I get up to speeds of about 65 or 70 miles an hour, I have to hit the volume and adjust it up 10, 20, 30% just to hear what's being said on my audiobook. But I did not have to touch the volume controls at all while I was driving this car, which is a huge, huge plus in my book.
Here's the key fob. Kind of a nice looking unit. You have 4 buttons on the front: panic button, trunk release, lock and unlock, and then another silver button right here to release the actual physical key. Doesn't pop out with quite the satisfying noise that I'd like. Let's try, I get 2 keys because this is a rental and they want to keep them together. Let's try the second key fob and see if it snaps out really nice. That's a little bit better. So, decent key fob. Let me switch hands real quick so we can start the car up. So here's the steering wheel setup. On the left-hand side, we have the button for the voice assistant, also a mode button to cycle through radio, Bluetooth connectivity, all that stuff here on the center display. You have a control to adjust the volume and the track you're listening to, and then additional buttons to answer and hang up a phone call. On the right-hand side, we have our cruise controls. Also, this button is a menu selector button to adjust the screen in the gauge cluster. These actually feel really nice. Hyundai has done a really good job making these out of quality plastic. I also want to point out the stalks. I haven't seen this before, but there's also actually a setting right here so that you can turn off the daytime running lights. I just thought it was interesting. Usually this is just a standard off, but it says DRL off, which I felt like it was worth mentioning. Up above, we do have a pretty attractive gauge cluster. On the left-hand side, we have RPMs and a temperature gauge. In the center, we have a really nice digital display, and on the right-hand side, we have our speedometer and a fuel gauge at the bottom. The display has a number of screens on it. I'm going to push this button right here a couple of times and cycle through the screens with you. But I just want to point out that up above, we do have the P, which stands for park. It's the gear you're in. Let me shift the gears real quickly. Reverse, neutral, and drive. Also pop it over into sport mode, and you can see I'm in gear number 1. To the right of that, we have the distance until empty, so I can drive this car another 325 miles before it's empty. And then on the bottom, you see that it's actually 65 degrees outside. It's beautiful right now. And we have our odometer showing that it's been the car's been driven about 17,000 miles. Now the screen itself has a couple of screens I want to show you. We have tire pressure. We also have a really nice menu structure to change all the features on the car. This is super easy to use, so you can just find exactly what you need, select it quickly, and then change the setting, which I love, because not all the cars are like this. Some of these, you have to dig through the manual to figure out what you need to do. We also have a digital speedometer, average speed, accumulated mileage on the trip, drive info, and then back to the digital speedometer. So there's a number of screens that are kind of fun to play around with. I just think the gauge cluster is pretty attractive overall. To the left, we have window controls, we have our mirror controls, and a latch. And you'll notice there's no door lock here either, because the door lock button is actually on the center of the display here. You just push this button to lock or unlock the vehicle. Up on the dash, we have simple controls to adjust the brightness of the display up in the gauge cluster, along with our traction control on and off button. And then down below, you also have the hood release. Side view mirrors do not have blindside detection, but they do have a small cutout in the upper left-hand corner to kind of give you a wider view of the road. This is a smaller vehicle, so that actually works great, but you don't get that same cutout on the passenger side view mirror. Up top, we have two lights. You just have to push them to activate the lights. In the middle, there's a control to adjust whether or not the lights are going to turn on when you open a door. You also have a large sunglass holder. There's also a standard rear view mirror. No buttons of any kind on it. Just a simple toggle switch right there. No garage door buttons, which I'm kind of surprised at. There's also no garage door buttons on the sunshade. You'll see you just get a mirror, and then this thing right here that'll pop out to help you block some additional sun. You do get a light. I kind of breezed past it, but it's underneath the sun visor, and it just turns on and off with the touch of a switch. Below there is our center display. I kind of think this is attractive. It sticks out of the dash a little bit. Here's a side view. Fairly large screen with some nice colors. This is the home screen right here. You'll see that I'm connecting my phone via Bluetooth right now and listening to an audiobook. There's also dedicated buttons on both the left and the right side to help you jump through all the important menu structures. Let me just show you a couple. Go to the menu button and see that there's Android Auto and Apple CarPlay preloaded on this vehicle, along with some other apps that you can play around with. Let's go back to the home screen. Get a phone button right in the center, so you can actually make phone calls using this, hitting the dial button, or you can look at your contacts or your call history or go through your favorites. Jump to the app screen right here, and the setup screen. Now all of these also have buttons right here on the right and left side to help you jump through and get to those screens quickly. But it's actually organized pretty well. And I was able to connect my phone via Bluetooth within about 10 seconds, which is, well, it's pretty fast. There's also dials right here to adjust the temperature and turn on and off the audio, or adjust the tune or the track that you're listening to. All in all, this has worked great, and I think it's pretty attractive, so it's nice to have while you're driving around. Should note, you got the date, the clock, and then you see some additional information about your cell. So you can see my cell phone has about half battery life, and then it's connected via Bluetooth, playing audio, and that I have 3 out of 4 bars on the cell signal. Anyway, below there we have our hazard button, along with 2 vents. I already showed you this, but this is the lock. Seems like the only lock button for the entire vehicle. Below there are climate controls, nice dials to adjust the intensity of the fan and the temperature. These have a little bit of rubber on top, so that makes gripping it just that much more comfortable. There's also simple buttons right in the center to adjust where the vents are going to blow. And then you have your defroster settings, AC on and off button, and then whether or not you want to open the vents to the exterior of the vehicle. Below there we have a storage cutout, fairly large, fits my cell phone easily, and then you have 2 power ports, an auxiliary jack and a USB port right there. Behind there is the gear shift, It is plastic, but this is a rubbery material that makes it really easy to grip, and you can shift through the gears really smoothly. When you do put it in reverse, you'll notice that you do get a rear view camera that pops up on the center display, along with some guides that'll show you where you're turning the vehicle. You'll see the resolution isn't great. This is a car. I mean, you can make out that it's a car, but it's kind of grainy and blocky, which isn't great to see. But it still works fine. It does the job. And when you turn the vehicle, you'll notice that the guides also turn to show you exactly where you're steering. Going back to the gear shift, you can also put this thing in drive and then shift it over into sport mode. And you can use Hyundai's SHIFTRONIC technology to shift the gears manually simply by pushing up or down on the gear shift. There's also a drive mode button right here next to the gear shift. When you push it, you can cycle back and forth between sport mode and regular mode. And you'll notice that icon is popping up right here on the display in the gauge cluster. Behind there we have a parking brake, 2 cup holders, then we have a center armrest. This is really nice smooth leather on top, and it opens up to reveal a pretty large storage space. It's kind of dark down there, so let me turn on a light. You do get a felt-like material at the bottom, but no power ports or USB ports of any kind in there. And then there's also the glove box. Pretty good size. It's got a ton of owner's manuals in it, and also the registration materials. On my personal car, all I keep in the glove box are my manual, my registration, and then a first aid kit. So it looks like all that will fit perfectly on this vehicle. So I jumped in the back seat, and there's actually quite a bit of legroom back here, maybe 6 inches between my knees and the back of that front seat. That front seat, this is the driver's seat by the way, is pushed back a good distance. I'm 6 feet tall, and I do like a little legroom when I'm driving, so I pushed this back probably 3/4, and despite that, I still got plenty of space back here. The back of the seats is a plastic material. These do tend to scuff up a little bit, but the seats on this car look pretty good, not a whole lot of scuff marks. You do get some storage space back here in the form of a pocket. This is some nylon netting, and it feels like it's made out of pretty high quality materials. So you have one of the pockets on the driver's seat, and then another one right here on the passenger seat. On the back of the center armrest for the front seat passengers, no vents or power ports of any kind, but you do get a clean looking unit right here. And you'll notice there are a little bit of scuff marks, but despite this being a rental car, it still looks pretty good. On the door itself, you'll see you have window controls and a door latch, but no door lock. Usually you'll find a door lock maybe right here or up here on the top of the door itself, but there's actually no door lock of any kind on the door, which I find kind of interesting. Also up top, you do have a handle and a small hook to hang a jacket, and an additional handle right here. On the back of the seat itself, there is a center armrest that pulls down to reveal 2 pretty decent sized cup holders. And then you get your car seat anchors, which are not super shallow. If you'll notice, you can't see the car seat anchor without manipulating the seats, but when you do manipulate the seat, you'll see that the car seat anchor is right there, so it's not too shallow. So if you do need to install a car seat on this car, it shouldn't be too difficult.
Alright, so let's close things out by taking a look at the hatch. You'll see that this is a nice big rectangular shape, which I think is a positive because it means you can get things like suitcases, golf clubs, all kinds of things back here easily without having to arrange them in a weird way to get them to fit. There's also a privacy shield, although it's really easy to remove. You just have to pull up on these little cords right here that attach to the door and then give it a gentle tug and it just sort of pops right out. It was actually pretty easy. I was able to do it first try within about 15 seconds, which I think is pretty good. Once you remove that privacy shield, you'll see just how big the storage space back here is. It's actually pretty big. Also, underneath the floor of this area, there is a spare tire. It's a temporary, but at least you have that. And you can fold those rear seats down if you need more room. It's actually pretty easy to do. You just have to pull up on these little plastic latches and the seats fold forward without any effort at all. Although I did notice that I had to push both the driver's seat and the passenger seat forward a little bit to make enough room for those seats to come down all the way. But once you get those seats to collapse, you'll notice that you get a much bigger space. And because this is a hatchback, there's no weird opening between the the trunk space and the cabin of the vehicle. It's just all open, which is great because it means you can take advantage of all the storage space on the Elantra GT. Oh, and I kind of glazed over this, but there is also a power port in the back. It's on the passenger side of the vehicle, and although I've never used these on my actual vehicles, it's still nice to have back here. All right, so that's pretty much everything end to end on the 2018 Hyundai Elantra GT. I'm a pretty big fan of this vehicle. It's fun to drive, it's got updated technology, and I just like the hatchback style. I think it makes this car really, really practical. So with that being said, I'm going to give this one 5 stars. Look, there's nothing I can think of to improve on this vehicle. It's, well, it was a pleasure to drive. But maybe you feel differently? If so, please leave me a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you join me next time when I rent and review my 128th rental car. I'll see you then.